Our second reading this morning comes from the prophet Isaiah. Hear the word of the Lord. Shout it aloud. Do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the descendants of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions and seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast? A day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry, to provide the poor wanderer with shelter, when you see the naked, to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and you will say, "Here I am." If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Your people will rebuild the ancient ruins and will raise up the age-old foundations. You will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Gotta confess, Disney World's great. The lack of sleep catches up to you at some point. So I want to tell a personal story, so I'm asking forgiveness this morning. I'm going to go down a little different road. I was working with a builder who I can pick on because they no longer exist. I was working with Royce Builders. And it was right before I started seminary. And Royce was doing some good things. Never thought I'd say that. They had done that program where you build a house in a week and you give it away. And they'd done a bunch of charitable work. And it was good stuff. It was. And they encouraged their company to go out and participate in all these activities. They helped with Habitat for Humanity. And they really were working hard to be good neighbors in the community. And I was fine with it. I thought that was good. And then I went to a meeting, and they had a copy of the ad, keyword ad, not article, full page, talking about, in the Houston Chronicle, all the things they had done. Look, community, look all the good things we've done. And I got in a lot of trouble. Because as I read that page, I looked at it, and I gotta be honest, I was disgusted. I was absolutely disgusted. And I went to my boss and I was like, this is totally wrong. He goes, why? I said, you're advertising all this stuff? Yeah, we did. We did all that good stuff. It's good stuff. I'm like, you did it to make yourself look good. You didn't do it because you cared. And my boss, somewhere in that moment between hearing what I said and the backside chewing that was coming, asked me a simple question. What's the good of doing all this stuff if nobody knows about it? And I looked at him and I said, because you care. I tell that story, A, because I think it's very pointed. Royce Builders was doing a lot of good stuff, yes, but they were doing it, in my opinion, for the wrong reason. They wanted to look good. Wasn't long after that I did go to seminary. That was one of those tipping points in life that pushed me over. I've never forgotten that argument. I've never forgotten, and I was discussed ever after, but every time they said, we're going to do these good things, I was like, why? I think my boss took the position that I was not a company guy. I was okay with that. I work for a different company now. The passage you just heard is from a time when we would call the post-exile. The Hebrews have returned to Jerusalem, but the temple has not yet been rebuilt. And I'll tell you, I've seen a lot of things. Some of you have seen more, some of you have seen less. But I've come to one conclusion. People are people. Good, bad, and different, people are people. And when you read this passage, you see that. God is calling the people out. You're fasting. Why? You're only fasting for a day. Why? Apparently during this time, occasionally the masters would set their slaves free. And then shortly after that, go, you know what? That's not a good idea. I think you're going back into slavery. They would do things because it looks good. And I think now is a very appropriate time to talk about this. Because in just a couple of weeks, we're going to enter that season called Lent. And it's an interesting season because a lot of people will go, well, I'm going to do some stuff. I'm going to fast. That's a great word. I love that word, fast. Because fasting tends to slow me down. And they'll say, well, I'm going to give up this or I'm going to give up that. I've tried it once or twice. I tried giving up chocolate one year. I tried. You notice that word, right? And the idea, as it's been explained to me, is you give this up so that you focus on God. Don't need this, I'm focused on God. And what I found was, as I'm in the checkout counter at Randall's, I'm not focusing on God when I'm looking at the Hershey bar. I'm thinking, why? We will do things for Lent. And just like sometimes we come to church, or we contribute money to this, that, the other, we do it because it looks good. It looks good. You look good because you're sitting in the pews at church. People think you go to church, you must be a good person because you went to church. They don't know us. We're silly around here. We're fairly okay. I don't know if we're good. We're working towards good. We're not there yet. But in our social communities, yes, I go to church. That's like a badge of honor. I once had a lady, I was doing a customer service on her house, and I had the fish on the back of my truck. And she wanted something that was totally not wonderful. It wasn't going to happen. I kid you not, she looked at me, she goes, sir, I see by the fish on your truck, you're a Christian, you're a good man, so you're going to do what I want. She didn't know me that well, did she? So as we come to that season of Lent, the question is not what are we going to do? The question is why? Think about that for a little bit. So as y'all know, just got back from Disney World. Okay, most of me got back from Disney World. There's a part of it that's still there. Went to Star Wars Land. Asked me about it after the service. Let me phrase it. Asked me about that after the congregational meeting. It was fantastic. But I had a really wonderful experience on one of the rides. You ever notice when you go to places, and sometimes you hear that sound that is just absolutely magically incredible. The little child is giggling at something funny or fun is happening. I love that sound. I do. The little child giggling because this is so wrapped up with joy and fun, and all the other good things, right? So we're on this ride. And it's going, and it's banking, and it's turning, and we're doing stuff, and it's great. And I hear that laugh. And it's great. It's a wonderful laugh coming from my wife. And I love Star Wars, I do. Read the books, watch the movies, play with the toys. I love Star Wars. But for a moment on this ride, the best part of it was her laugh. I was just taken back. It's like, wow, I love that. It's not to say my wife's not happy, and she is married to me. That's good. Y'all hush. But it was so neat. That pure joy made me feel good. And it gets me to thinking, there's that little holiday coming up this week. And men, we all know the phrase, right? Happy wife?
Happy life.
Oh, she knows it too.
Oh my God, my teacher says it all the time to her husband because they both work at this school that I study.
Okay, do you know the other phrase that we usually throw out there?
Happy spouse, happy house.
I haven't heard that one. No, the other one is, if mama ain't happy,
Ain't nobody happy.
everybody got that one. No, happy wife, happy life. So the question is, with happy wife, happy life, is it you got to keep her happy so you don't get in trouble? Or is it we find joy when they're happy? And not just the wife, let's be clear. We do a lot of things to show love. I can hug somebody. And I got to be honest, we're honest in here, that perhaps I don't love. It's not about the actions. God does not measure us by our actions, but by our hearts. And I know it gets hard because there are things we expect to do or are expected to do. But I think as the season of Lent is approaching, a time of reflection, maybe we need to spend a week or two, the next week or two, preparing. Think about what it is. Does God really care if you give up chocolate? Sorry. Nope. Does God care if you seek to get a little closer to Him? I think that. I want to invite you for the next couple of weeks to ask yourself basic questions. And we're going to start in just a minute when we do our time of reflection, but why are we doing these things? Why are we fasting? Why are we giving up stuff? Why are we going to the Tuesday Lenten study? It's not about doing it. It's about where our hearts are. It's not about the feeding of the hungry. It's about loving people. When we truly love God and when we truly love others, the actions will follow. That's just all there is to it. You think that through. You think of something you love. Lord, you made a great point. I love my dog. And I got to be honest. Friday night, I got in that house at 11 o'clock. Believe it or not, before I put the suitcases down, I was already hugging the dog.
You did hug your dog while you come and then we go to sleep.
Do what?
What?
What'd you say?
I didn't say anything.
Coward. When we love somebody, God and others, the actions will follow. Don't come to church because you think you're obligated, because we're not. We come because we want to be closer to God and to others. Prophet Isaiah, God calls the people out. It's not about the fasting. It's about your hearts. Why are you doing this? Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, in the midst of our lives, it is easy to lose sight of you. We give thanks that you don't lose sight of us. Lord, as we seek to be closer to you, Help us. Lift us up and draw us closer. Open our hearts to the possibility